You got a fancy house.
Mike, we forgot all about you.
I forgot my other
We're just shooting the shit.
You know, I'm just glad he's there, you know.
Yeah.
The respirators.
Hey, can you feel that up there?
There's a lot more air. No.
Oh, the nose, yeah.
This thing sucks right now.
Yeah, this is what I'm used for.
But it allows you to spread COVID too.
Have you used those where it's like altitude training?
Oh, yeah, we're doing like, how to breathe on the.
Those are gnarly.
Yeah, that was meant to be
It's
hard.
been a
to
while.
I know.
Yeah,
Air gets thinner when you get higher.
It's too small.
It's pretty fun though.
Gotta set the heat.
I only used it one time. One time I got so tired.
You probably did.
It might just be because the windows are open.
Oh, there you go.
There it is. My fault.
Yeah.
Can you feel that?
Here.
Here.
Did you turn the heater on?
No, I didn't turn it on.
Funky. The difference between the heat and air, just like fans and air conditioning, really close.
So it's on cool.
I've noticed that's older than
And it's on 50 degrees for cooling.
No, that's
Might just take a second. Oh, yeah, it's true. Oh,
we're
the breeze is cool with the window too.
All
Yeah, it
day,
hasn't been on
yeah.
for a year.
Today, and yesterday, and tomorrow, next day.
Is that going? John, is that going?
Yeah.
Hey, Mike.
Good day though.
How's it going?
Doing a lot of revisions, so. Redoing people.
You know, what should have done was put a speaker on there so that
Today,
so Michael can
some
speak to us
meetings
and ask
that
questions.
the contractors before,
We're too
they
stupid. We should
ran drip line underneath the
Probably.
flags.
We might even have one.
Not in the PVC sheet or anything. Yeah, pretty stupid. That's fun.
So
Figuring out.
that was enough. We'll start. So if you look at your, you don't have to, if you have your schedule out, we're going to do, finish the California, so we're going to do Cornice. So this is what I got for the next 3 days.
We, California's on to the other week. That's it?
Yeah. But we didn't finish it, but we finished what I'm going to show you about it. So we're going to do cornice treatment tonight. And I'm going to try to push the roof trusses and roof sheathing up also tonight. I'll probably do it recently. And then that'll leave all of Wednesday for stair unit. And then Thursday, that guy's coming up in Thousand Oaks to do green roofs and alternative roofs, maybe insulation. He doesn't do insulation. I told him he'd have to do the whole crew, but I said, if you have an insulation unit, you're already prepared and doing it, but otherwise I can do that. Yeah, so that's Thursday, and then next week, final prep is Monday, and we'll probably look at blueprints, saving that, and then Wednesday's final and Thursday's final review. It's funny, that last week's pretty much final, wiped out. Yeah.
Feels like we just started.
This is week 5.
Six.
We're on week 5.
Yeah, it's a 6-week class. Even 8 would be better. But they can't fit 2 8-week sessions in the summer. It's pretty bad now anyway with one weekend between the summer classes. That's really hard on a teacher. You know, the end of school is a busy time because it's all this bullshit you have to do with grades and upload everything now.
Why don't they just make it one
Syllabus.
summer session instead of split into 2? Then you have.
I've been asking them for 5 years if they could do that, and they keep saying no, the computer program can't do it. We just run them together, then we could get a a 10-week class, which would be a lot more decent.
That's what ECSB does, they just have one summer session.
CC's like John's homeschool class is special.
You know, you could make it a 1.5 units each session, and then do 1.5, 3 now, 1.5 times a week also for both sessions. No, they wouldn't let you do
How
it.
do you do half the time?
They wouldn't let you do it because
You'd have to enroll twice and you're paying.
yeah, you have to enroll twice, and if the class got the same name, and you can't repeat a class, so you can't have the same name. I could make up a whole new class, small one like that, or 2 new ones, but it takes a year to do that.
How do you retake this class?
What?
If you fail this class.
Oh, you
how
can
do
retake a failed class,
Okay.
but you can't retake a past class.
Thought I heard something, we can't retake a failed class with the same teacher, but this program is probably different, because there's only 3 teachers.
You can take them up to 3 times. You can keep failing. But then after 3, they're like, no more.
After 3, really,
Yeah,
that's
you
a
can't
lost
do it.
cause.
You can't do it with 3, you know.
You gotta go to a different college. Try it there.
Sorry, we give up on you.
Homeschooling.
Move to Sacramento, take it up there. Okay. So we got a lot, most stuff tonight's in the book, so get your book out. And everybody have a book tonight? Or do you want me to put it on the? You know, if we do it on the projector, then we have to dim the lights a little bit, then it's hard to see your book.
Might be a little cooler though.
Yeah, does everybody have a book?
Yeah.
You got yours? Oh, yeah.
Michael, do you have a book? Michael, have a book?
Trying to mute.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
My book is online.
How about, what's his name? You know, Joel, isn't Joel doing it online too? No, Joel's here, I mean, Josh.
I don't see it at this point.
Who was the other, did someone have to work one night, use the Zoom?
Everyone was sick, remember?
You were sick.
He was sick like 2 weeks ago, and then we.
Was that the only
We
other
made fun
time
of him
someone
for it.
besides,
No, it seems like there was someone else, the same week he was sick, there's someone else in there.
Who was that guy that showed up super late to the first one and then disappeared? That was that guy.
Oh, Amor?
Yeah,
Humor special.
yeah.
Yeah, it must have been
Amar's a special case?
April.
At least he's coming into the labs, you know, stands out there and watches his work, it's better than nothing. So I give him, I'd love to give him a lot of crap. So, so 321 and the 12th edition, page 321. Something like that. Oh, 308, 11th edition. Yeah. So, yeah, 11th edition and 321, 321 and 12th edition. Got that? So we're looking at the opening that's got the brick. What the heck is that? Oh, the chimney. Chimney coming up. Everybody see that? It's the only picture on that page that has red brick chimney in the middle of the frame.
So you frame a chimney the same way you frame a skylight, right?
Yes, skylight or attic access on a ceiling. And, you know, all you're thinking about is transferring the weight adequately. And, I mean, you don't need to engineer it. You can just sort of realize that usually it takes, you have to double up the joist or the rafters, which is whatever hole you're talking about. This one's a chimney, so these are the rafters. You have to double up the rafters to the side, you know, on each side of it, and then put double headers across. That'll distribute the weight good enough. I've never heard of an instance where you have to do more than that. Sometimes you can even get away with less. I can't think of the circumstance. If we went to the framing, the ceiling framing, which is in the chapter before, there's a reason that the joists are, it's the blocks are close to a girder that's hanging up. So it's not far enough away to double block, so a single block. So there's, you know, there's frame, like unusual framing near it that can support it. Some of that structure you don't need to do it, but in general you need to double frame it.
Patrick, when you say weight, are you referring to if you're framing for a skylight? Because if it's a chimney, there's no weight.
You're framing for the roof material.
It's just the dead weight of the material. Yeah.
Why are the blocks stepped like that? Just ease of framing?
Well, if it's an attic, they're just using the same size as the rafter and they don't want to shave it, so they just drop it. So it should stick out the bottom. Of course, if it was a cathedral ceiling, you'd have to shave one side or the other. Okay, let's see what's next. And then collar ties, that's 309 in the 11th edition and 322 in the 12th edition. So this is a comment that Larry Hahn made. Larry?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
There's a supervisor in LA named Hahn. I keep calling him by different name. Yeah, Larry Hahn. He said that the joists are nailed to the rafters and it forms a truss. That was a good observation. However, it's not necessary to either have a truss or a joist acting as a truss, because the weight on a roof pushes the walls out. The rafters tend to push the walls out, so you have joists going across that hold those walls together. But you can put another wall. If you have other walls butted against those walls, they're not going to go out. So that in that case, you wouldn't require joist. If you didn't have that and they were going to push out, then you do have to do something to hold those together. You could come up with a collar tie, which is a joist that's, I think you can go a third up. This one looks higher. The requirements change. I don't know, John some of you may know. I think you can go a third up from the plate from where the joist is. So you're not right in visual. You can still see it. If you get too high, it's not going to really hold it right. It's just going to hold the top. So you got to get down. You can go, I think, a third of the way up that opening. So you see the collar tie in that picture, right? 1040, picture 1047 and 1243. It's pretty high.
So a collar tie is in the top third, whereas a rafter tie or a ceiling joist, which is used as a rafter tie, has to be in the bottom third. That makes sense.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. The difference between
But
those.
that's actually how the code pretty much spells it out. So a collar tie.
Oh, actually, this is the first one, which is not labeled. You're calling it a rafter tie? No, that's a collar tie too. It's up high.
Yeah, those don't hold the building from spreading. You have to have a rafter tie, which is down at the.
Well, why would they have a collar tie at all?
So the collar tie keeps the rafters from pushing off the ridge or
says, under collar ties tied together two rafters on opposite sides of the roof. They do not support the roof but provide bracing and stiffening to hold the ridge and rafters together. In standard construction, 1x6 boards are installed at every third or fourth pair of rafters. So I'll look that up because it's unclear. I thought they had to be a third of the way up to be effective.
Yeah, so if they, because it's back east, the bottom, what we call collar ties, is an after tie there. That's the versa. So in order to resist the load of spreading, you have to be in the bottom third. So it's called after tie. These are collar ties which help hold the ridge together, help it stay.
Okay. They may not require those. I don't know, because we have the strap over the ridge now.
Yeah.
So that may have been obviated. by that.
The strap 100% replaces that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the rafter ties, which we used to call collar ties, that's what's interesting. Had to be a third because they wouldn't be effective if they were too high. And they said they're 1x4. Hey, Mar, welcome. So they said they use 1x4, 1x6. That's like in an attic. If you were going to see it, what they usually do is they take a 2x6 and then they dress it. They'll put one by on each side of it, or they'll put two 2x6s, make it look like a beam. They only have to be every 4 feet. They don't have to be every rafter. They can skip 2 and be every, or 1 depending on your layout. So they can be 4 feet apart. So they can be thicker like beams. You know, it'd be interesting to see what cost of a house where they stop boxing things and start using real timber. You know, a really high-end house wouldn't box it. They just use a real piece of timber. But up to through a middle-class house, they box it. If you do a good job, you can hardly tell. You know, I told you that the cathedrals in France and Europe, they didn't want ceiling joists because they wanted it to go up to a point, religiously. So they had to put something to hold the walls together. So they put those flying buttresses, which are just supports on the outside of the walls. That's why they have those. So it ended up being one of their more identifiable features. They look pretty cool. All that was just to hold those walls. And those are high walls, and they're stone, and roof's heavy. I mean, I'm not talking lightweight construction and other reasons. Okay, so do you have your book with you, both of you? Yes. Excellent. So we're just going through miscellaneous roof trimming topics. What do you guys have? What book is that? 12. So that would be 322. And what's yours, Dennis? 12. Okay, 322. Then I want you to look at that right next to the collar tie picture. There's or below the collar tie on the old edition, there's a picture of a purlin. See that? Let's look for a labeled purlin.
Which is,
It shows a ceiling joist and a rafter, and then it shows a little brace between them. So they used to do it. They don't do it so much anymore, but it could be done. They used to not get rafters wide enough to span the whole span because they're expensive, right? If it was a big building, if it was a big building, then they'd do something like steel or truss. But if it's just a large residential building, they may use a smaller rafter, but then they have to support it halfway across the run. So they put a brace in, like you see there, and then a purlin is a piece that runs 90 degrees to the rafters, runs the other way. So in any board that runs across the roof is called a purlin, no matter what its function is. There's various kinds of purlins. This is one to hold up in Japanese temple construction, purlins are even a more integrated part of their roof, and they use them quite a bit. You don't see these too much anymore. A lot of times because we have vaulted ceilings and they wouldn't work for vaulted ceiling, but also I don't. People just use heavier timber. It's just more work. But oh yeah, you'll see them if you take apart buildings. You know, if you deconstruct or demolish a building in Santa Barbara that's 100 years old or more, you might see that. Then on the next page, it's well, they have a dormer. Well, actually, I think on one of the handouts I gave you, it has a picture of a couple of dormers. Maybe not that. Yeah, there. That one. Is that it there? Let me see. Oh, this one also has a California roof. This handout. 1x6 roof nailed. Oh, it looks like what it is. Like golly. And then, no, I didn't give it to you. So on the 12th edition, on 323, they show a gable dormer. Both books show a shed dormer, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. I can't tell what it is. Oh yeah, no, I can't go back. So all they do is the same kind of horizontal opening as we've been talking about, the skylight or the chimney, except it's bigger. So lead in a dormer. That's a working dormer. Sometimes they'll just put dormers on top of the frame that might California them, not just on top of the sheathing, just as a decoration. But some people like that look of a gingerbread dormer. It's kind of silly. Waste that money. But if you integrate it in the framing, then you can actually, if you have a room up in the attic, that could be a little sitting space or place to spy on your neighbors. I mean, there's all kinds of uses for those. So, and then it's framed like we've been framing everything else, but it gives you a picture of it there. And they double up the outside rafters, and then it becomes almost like a plate where you can put studs for the dormer on it. So you can see right there what it looks like.
So the size is split.
The what?
This one right here.
Yeah.
Size is a single plate.
Yeah, then there's,
And the front is a double plate.
yeah, don't worry about that detail. I don't know why they did that. You could do it in a number of ways. Maybe because that span, maybe because that window span needs a header. But that's not a bearing. That's not a bearing wall, right? So today we'd say, well, if it's not a bearing wall, you could go really light. But anyway, that's what they're doing. They're putting in a little header there by tripling or doubling the plate. Good observation. God, I never would have seen that. So on the page before, in both books, there's a thing called a shed dormer. And back east, we call them a dustpan dormer because they kind of look like a dustpan that's sitting on a roof. And, you know, it's like, you have a roof like that. And then they want to make the attic into make living space up there. So they just run this dormer like that. And then it usually comes like a couple of feet from the end of the roof. So I think it looks really shitty. It's one of my least favorite designs. It looks like this from the side. You see a little bit of the roof, and then the whole rest of it is that dormer, which from the inside, now you have a decent headroom and you can make use of it. So the idea is great to get more room. It just doesn't look great. It's got a different slope than the rest of the roof, the other side of the roof. Things, any rooms going. But that's how they frame that. It's essentially the same way, except a dustpan dormer usually comes over the wall. The other dormer's partway up the roof. As you can see by the picture, they both have a picture of, no, they're different pictures. That's really interesting. They couldn't just replicate the same picture. Anyway, the gable dormers are usually up the roof, and then the dustpan's usually all the way to the wall because they're trying to get a lot of space. So they could just build a two-story house. This probably started, it's prevalent in New England, so it might have started when, you know, it wasn't as easy to build a two-story house. Yeah. Okay, and then go to the next, just flip over the next page of both of those books, and they show a gambrel roof. We didn't talk about that in our roof identification phase. But that's the one that looks like a barn roof. I don't know what it is about that roof, but people everywhere want to have a shed or something in their yard that has that roof. I don't know what the allure of that is, but so you can see if it's the first figure, or the two, yeah, both books have two figures. First one's if you're doing a, you know, if it's a pretty big size thing, then they'll put a stud underneath that joint, which really cuts your inside room again, right? And then you have to have a ceiling joist or collar tie to hold it together, because that's a real unstable. Those two rafters coming together like that, it's really unstable. So that's the way they do it when they have a big roof. If you have a little shed in your backyard, you can do that and just depend on the gusset, the little triangular piece that holds those two plates together. If you just nail the crap out of that or screw it and make that really tight, it's a small enough structure you can get away with without having to have a wall. Looks like they still have a collar tie there. Probably a Home Depot sells those, you know, those sheds out front. I'm sure they must have a gambrel one in the catalog. But if you really want it,
Is it any information that we can get on, I guess either the book or the rafter book that you have, how to obtain those angles? Or it's just out of the scope of this discussion? Like the angles to create a gambrel roof.
well, the top rafter, you could do it. It says 212 and 412. You could do that, obviously, for the top thing. But they would meet at a different. If you wanted them to meet those two rafters together, they would be cut. I mean, it's probably related to the slope angle, but I'm not exactly sure how. And then the bottom one is the bottom rafter sitting on the wall in the one, so that's kind of weird, right? That's not how a normal rafter sits. So I'm not sure your book tables would help you there. Would help you for the top. And that's nice because at least you have that ridge cut taken care of. You don't really need a bird's mouth, so
Isn't the bottom rafter, isn't it a 12-3? Like you looked at it backwards, so couldn't you theoretically use the rafter book to now stand that way? Stand be the wall.
yeah, the bottom cut. Yeah, you're right. The bottom cut would be a 12-3 ridge cut. Like if you turn the book sideways, so that you're looking at the first picture from the bottom, from the side, where it has the 312 slope and the triangles, the 12s on the bottom and the 3s going up. And that bottom, you can see that bottom cut is parallel to is a horizontal cut. Well, in place, it's a horizontal cut. But when you're cutting it, it would be a 12-3 cut, just like we do. Yeah, so you could get the bottom cut of that bottom rafter and the top cut of the top raft. And you just have to kind of fake where the joints, which wouldn't be that hard. You could draw it out to scale. Yeah, that's a good point. See, look. Boy, I guess you guys are really learning this stuff. That's good. That's really great. Okay, what's the next one? Apologize, Perlin, Gaylord armor, Gambler, Cornets. Okay, so we're going to skip over to a chapter ahead that's got finished. Communications. Yeah, 439 in the 12th edition. And 435. Wow, it's amazing how close they're in the old edition. Old edition. They get close because they actually put in a whole chapter. So when you get that far, it cuts back the extra pages. So they would have to change it. So on the 11th edition, go to 436. That's the next page. And stay on 439 on the 12th edition. So look at that. The first, in both of those pages, the first subsection in red is cornice design and terms, right? We see that. So that whole area, look to the, it's one page up from the 12th edition and the next page on the 11th edition where they show different roof wall combination. You see that? All those pictures. So the cornice is the area from the fascia to the wall, that whole under the eave. It's called cornice. C-O-R-N-I-C-E. It's an old architectural term. I think it goes back even to the Greek temples. They have a cornice. They call it, their roof overhangs, and they call it a cornice. So it's been here a long time. And that's, you need to know about that because that's how the roof is finished at the end of it. The top, there's nothing, the ridge is covered up. The shingles are there, but then the bottom, there's a lot of things you can do with it. The underside, fascia. So that's what we're going to look at in a few minutes. So a box cornice is like, so go to, we'll just look at the pictures. Go to 441 in the 12th edition and 437 in the 11th. To see all those pictures of cornice areas. Typical cornice details for architectural styles. So look at that. Look at A, right? Figure A, upper left, has that. See the word soffit? So the soffit is a covering that covers. It goes the whole length of the eave, and it covers the bottom of that cornice, so you can't look up into the eaves and see rafters. All you can see is that soffit. So that's called a boxed or closed cornice. And the B is the same way, and D is the same way, and E is the same way. But C is an open cornice because there's no soffit. And that's the kind of stuff we're doing out in the patio, and that's the style I've been asking to look at around town. Where there's just a fascia covering the end of the rafter tails, and then there's blocks between the rafters and nothing else. There's nothing else to cover it up. So even though it's only one of 4 pictures, it's the one we have a lot of in Southern Cal. It's soffit. We covered by. No, they wouldn't have started with soffits. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. For the open cornice, you need because you'll see the underside of the roof is beneath the starter boards. They said somewhere, I can't remember Larry Hunt, you can use plywood, and I'm sure people have, but it's not nice. Even if you get plywood that AC, that's A side's good, there's no plugs, and it's just a veneer. The fact that it's veneer means that it could separate over time. So you're taking a chance with plywood that you would start first. Okay, so let's look at some of this vocabulary. So soffit on A, let's look at A, and then there's a few extra here and there that not all the pictures have. So you have fascia, which is the piece that covers the end of the rafter tails. And there are even some designs, like for instance, C looks like it doesn't have fascia. There are some designs where they just leave the tails hanging, and you can see there's some designs where the tails go down and the roof starts at the edge of the building, and you just see sky through the rafters. They just separate the tails. I've seen that. It's not very common. Then there's some where they have the tails same way, except they do put a roof down at the end of the tail. They just don't put a fascia on it. So with those, sometimes they'll cut the end of the rafter. You know, sometimes they'll round it because it doesn't have a fascia, so you can decorate the end of the rafter. You kind of round it or do all kinds of stuff. Look around town, see if you see any of those when you're in your exploits around town. You might not, because it's pretty rare, but it does happen. This looks like this is one here, but who knows where they get these.
Top the rafter at the plate, and it's drawn like 4x6 with a nice detail on the end.
Oh, and that goes over.
That's the overhang.
Yeah.
It's like super detailed.
And how, but they don't have those rafter width, they go like every 4 feet or something.
These people, if they stitch them onto the
Oh, so
rafter,
it could be-
they're every 16 feet here. They just have a really nice detail.
Yeah. So that's another thing they do is they'll cut the tails off. They'll be a board over those. Next to them, they put big pocket, nice little beams. So there's fascia, soffit. Look at there's a vent, and it doesn't show. We're going to look at the underside of soffits in later pages. So
You can see the vent on letter E.
what's that?
You can see the vent on letter E.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was going picture time, but if you want to see a vent on a soffit, they have strips. Look at figure E. That's a truss that hangs over, and then they'll have a strip that goes the whole length of the soffit. They don't do that a lot anymore, and in the fire zones, you can't do it, I don't think, anymore. Unless they allow some of these modified, I don't know what they do. They may not allow those because there's air pressure that comes up, that's pushed up through that, so it kind of sucks a little bit of the air around it normally, and when the embers are flying through the air because of the fire, if they just happen to blow under the E, they'll tend to get sucked up. And then they go right into the attic, and that's it. Attic's like a tinder box. So they've allowed some vents, and I'll show you those. I've got some samples. But I don't know, they change it all the time. Every time we have a fire, they go back and forth one way or another.
They have fireproof vents for that.
Yeah, I'm going to show some of those. It also goes in fads, what the vents look like. So I'll show you what that vent on E. There's a photograph, a couple pages on the other side. You'll see that. So then A has brick mold, so that's not something we do. A brick veneer, that's not something we do here very much. Now notice they call that lookout. There's a 2x4 that goes from the wall out to the fascia, out to the end of the rafter. It's got a dotted line because it's behind that rafter, and it's nailed to the end of the rafter. And then it's nailed to a ledger on the wall. And that's what they usually put a soffit on. The reason they have a ledger on the wall is because your wall isn't always laid out evenly. Like it can be 16 or 2 foot on center, and then you come to a window, and it screws up it may not be symmetrical. So because they don't want to worry about you having a lookout nailed against the stud. And it's also not good to nail things against studs and walls, whether it's cantilever or a thing, because it's an entry for water and airspace. So it's preferable to hang things on the outside if you can. There's a lot of problems with cantilevers, Of course, we have a lot of a lot more weatherproofing material, bitchethane, but also what's the newer rubberized coatings, both those materials that seal a lot better than the old. Yeah, I forget what they call it. But when you have a cantilever in a building, let's say you got a second-story balcony, and you're going to put that, just run that joist through the wall, so that'll hold that. You don't need any support. Then you've got a vulnerability through here and through here, because you can't really seal that well. And there was that balcony in Berkeley about 5 or 8 years ago. There were a bunch of kids out on here. The thing fell. One kid died. And they said it was because this is all rotted out here. So we have better materials now, but only do a cantilever if you really know what you're doing. Jim loves them. Jim Cunningham. He's a cantilever kid. He just thinks they're the greatest thing. They are cool, because they're, it's part of the framing and they have their own support. But you really have to make sure that you're not going to allow any moisture in there or they'll rot and die. Okay. So they put a ledger and they attach it to whatever 2x studs are there. And then you can lay out that ledger any way you want and lay out perfectly for the lookouts. So that's why they have ledger. It's like that one by on California. There wasn't good nailing, so you put a strip down and you can find the nailing for it, and then you nail things to it. So using an intermediary piece that is better nailing is not an uncommon technique in building. And so you think new on B, it's got a soffit, it's a closed soffit. It's got molding on the fascia. We don't do that so much in here. If you have a Victorian house or some South Bank Eastern home, we tend to have really plain fascias out there. That one's nice because it shows the clapboard siding or horizontal, what do we call it? Horizontal siding. Dolly Varden or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I've never heard anybody call it that. That's what the book called it. But if you have that or shingles, you need to have some way to finish those at the top of your wall that looks nice. So usually they take a thing called a freeze board and they cut a it's got a groove cut in it, and then your shingles go down from there. Tuck in behind that little bracket. That's what that's trying to show. They don't do a very good job. Let's see, and then C's, I don't know what that C doesn't make a lot of sense. There's a crease board there. Sometimes instead of blocks, you could put a board all the way across, but this board is notched around the rafter. See, it hangs below the rafter. And you don't want to notch a 1 by 12 feet long and then another 12 feet on a roof if you don't have to. That's asking for it. But if you're trying to show off your carpentry skills, you might do that. In New England, when I lived in New England, they have all these traditions that are usually they're more involved out here. But the stairway, sometimes the stairway has a finish, they call it a stringer, but it's really just a finished piece. That sawtooth along the stair, and then it's a little bit above the stair, so it's a little strip of it. It's usually a 1x, and sometimes the top might have a decorative trim to it. We just hold the stringer out, and we put that behind, so we don't have to cut it like that, which is smart. In New England, they cut it, they saw cut it. They put the board over the stair with the stringer, so it's, and then they mark, and they cut it exactly so it'll fit. And usually there's a tread, a finished tread that goes on, and a finished riser, so those will hit the joint. So you have a little tiny bit of play that will be covered by those finished pieces. But otherwise, it's pretty, those guys get them right on there. It looks nice, but it's kind of crazy. You can just pull it out, shove it behind. Okay, then I have no idea what D is. What does it call it? A wide box cornice. I don't know, has anybody ever seen an overhang like that?
I like the kind of Asian style houses where it comes from you know what I'm talking about?
No, what style?
Like more oriental kind of roofs.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But it's a real low slope. Look, it's the lowest slope on that page. Somewhere they do it, somewhere and sometime they did that style. This author felt it was important to put it in there. And then the last one on this page, E, is a truss, obviously. And trusses fit right in the plate and they go out just like a lookout would, right? So you can nail the soffit right to the bottom of the truss.
I do have a question about image D. Sorry, D. On the top part, it says metal cap flashing and the metal and 5/8 splice or shipping.
Which
What-
picture?
D. Just where we were before. E. The one that it said white box cornice.
So, but letter D,
Letter D.
okay.
On the top, like on the roof, it says metal cap flashing,
Yeah,
and then flies for shipping. What are those?
well, I think it means it's a 5/8, just 5/8 plywood.
Okay.
Ply core. Dennis, you got any idea what ply core, have you ever heard that before? It might be a word that's not used anymore. Sometimes they have solid core plywood. They used to make those for cabinets, so that when you saw the edge, you'd see two veneers and then you'd see sort of blocks of solid wood. They don't do it anymore because they just edge band everything. But they used to do that and they call it solid core veneer ply. And then they also call the veneer core, as opposed to that.
Veneer core, from what I know, is just like actual plywood.
Yeah.
It's like MDO comes with MDF, and then you'll have
Yeah,
your metal, your plywood in the middle.
yeah,
That's a veneer core.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Do you find something on the internet?
Yeah, that's the same. Search plywood.
So yeah, so I don't know what that is. But do you notice something there about the ability to shed water on that letter D roof? You're gonna have a little reservoir back there, right?
Yeah.
So that could easily have, drains and vents in the middle of that for all we know. I'm just not familiar with that. That's funny.
Do you think that would be perhaps to,
I've never seen that kind of roof. Because usually, you want it to shed water, so.
Even flat roofs have some sort of
Yeah.
slope on them.
Yeah,
That
that's,
just looks flat.
yeah, that's really flat, especially being, so I don't know. There's information we don't have for it, but I've just never seen that kind of. You know, you could do a truss and have overhangs that much, you know, if you want it really wide. Like I said, I think De La Guerra Plaza, some of the old roofs on the left side as you're facing there have pretty big overhangs. So in places, I don't know, maybe the De La Guerras were from a wet part of Mexico. You know, Mexico has such different climates, you can't really generalize that it's dry or wet, because it can be both. But they do come with a lot of heat. So I imagine Mexico, and if any of you visit Mexico or have relatives in Mexico and you've been there, tell me if I'm wrong, but even the dry places, probably like New Mexico, when it rains, like you have a monsoon rain in the summer, it just dumps the whole sky with the stuff in the afternoon, then it's gone. Does that happen? Probably on places.
Rain for half hour.
Yeah. And that kind of rain, you'd want big eaves, because that's coming down really hard.
They have
Side
flat roofs with like very slow.
Yeah, in other places, other places probably doesn't rain at all. And then there's tropical places where it probably rains every day, you know.
And then waterproof with like tile, ground.
Yeah. It probably works for a while, right? Just
It does.
do it.
It works for a
Yeah.
long time.
You know, here, we don't build things to last because we know we're gonna tear them down, because we don't like from one owner to the next. We don't like
Every
style.
owner, remodels everything.
Well, yeah, I like that location. We're just gonna rip down the house and build the one we want.
Every time we buy a steel version, buy an house, they
Yeah, and we know what they look. We just go, yeah, we'll take the land, you know. And we're gonna tear it down and build our, whatever we're building. And then the next page, I don't know if they have it in the. Yeah, kind of. They have 3 different box cornice designs. See that? 442 and 438. Now, I don't know. I've never seen one that goes back up. In other words, they frame it right against the rafters on the bottom. I think maybe in the 50s that was the style, 50s and 60s, those places. It was kind of a modern, weird look, but you don't see many of those anymore. John, you ever seen that? Slope soffit? I saw somewhere, yeah, that middle picture, horizontal soffit, they call it an outrigger. I love it. Everywhere else they call it a lookout. So that picture 14.3 or 16.3 on 442 and 439, is everybody on those pages? That's a really clear picture of a lookout and a rafter. You know, there's not a bunch of other crap around there. So the soffit, they used to take fascia and they used to groove it from the bottom, and then that soffit would fit into that groove. Yeah, that's probably what that is meant to be, because otherwise it could pull away, you know. That gives it. Some people actually put a little piece of molding there to cover that crack, and then if anything shrinks, it's still covered. And then there's a ledger, like we said, against the wall, and then a lookout, and then there's a see that frieze? So that's just a piece that it could help to hold that soffit up, but usually if soffits are nailed pretty good, they don't need that. But also for the top of the wall, it's just kind of a finished piece, you know, for whatever your wall is. If it's stucco, it could be a stucco ground. If it's siding, it could be notched like we looked at before. This figure B on the other side with the lookouts, I can't understand what that. It's got a picture of a house and circle goes to the other drawing, but so I think that's the overhang over the gable end. But look at how wide it is. Whoever puts a giant gable overhang like that. Yeah, that's like, 3 feet. And the house is a typical New England, I forget the style, but it's only about a foot out. Yeah, that rake section is only about a foot out. I've never seen one. And there it doesn't look like it's, I don't know why it's so big. We don't need to worry about that. Fascia on the bottom of those pages, 439 and 442, it shows a plan, a top view of fascia, how it's mitered at the corners around the hip. And then where they join, where you can't get a long enough piece for the whole wall, you do a, what do they call that? Yeah, I guess a miter joint. It's another name, I can't think of it. But they miter it, so if it shrinks, you don't see all the way through because the end of the rafter will be a different color. And what you see is just, more of the same wood you see. So if there's a crack, that's a good way to, where it won't show as much. John, what do they call that joint? Scarf joint? Hey, somebody look up scarf.
Scarf joint is
It's literally a miter joint, right? Isn't that what a scarf joint is? Well, look it up for me.
it's probably technically a scarf joint.
Oh, 631.
Looks similar. Fancier.
Yeah, there it is. See, I'm old, but not out yet. Okay. Yeah, we used to call them scarf joints. I guess maybe they call them miter joints. I don't know. Okay, so let's do ventilation. Then we'll go on to trusses. So, go to 444 in the new edition and 441 in the old edition. So see that picture of the underside of an eave photograph? That's a long soffit, huh? Maybe that's that one they were talking, that box one you're talking about. But that's got like, what are those lines crossing the vent? But is that ply? Look at it, it looks like a texture. It looks like almost stucco. It could be plywood with little seam pieces. I mean, they used to do all kinds of different stuff back in the 50s. But what I wanted to show you was you can see that continuous soffit vent, right? Runs all the way to the end and past it. So usually it's in the middle, but it could be anywhere. If it's that size, then you can put it anywhere. So that's what those look like. And you'll see those around town because it wasn't that long. Then they have room for a light. And then on the drawing below it, or above it, which edition, they have these oblong vents. Instead of a continuous vent, they have a vent every 4 feet. And, you don't see that a lot anymore. It could be round or oblong or continuous. They just do different things. Now, so the question is, how do we vent a roof? So there's a lot of conditions. Depends on whether it's a cathedral ceiling or an attic. So when there's an attic, you got a lot more possible opportunities for venting. So if it's an attic, you can actually not vent the rafters at all, and just put a vent on each end of the attic. Say it's a gable roof, you can just put a vent on those walls, those triangular walls, and it blows through. And if you put the one vent higher than the other, you get extra points from the city. They really love it when you do that. And actually, if you do that, you can have less vent area for the square footage of your attic if you stagger them, because it actually helps the wind go through, the ventilation go through. But we've gotten away from vents in the gable ends. kind of an older style. So we prefer, for a while, we put vents like those really big vents on the roof. So the attic air would come in, well, could come in any number of ways. Could come in from soffit vents and then into the attic and then out of the attic through those. That's another way. And then we were talking the other day with Ben about a ridge vent. And if you do a ridge vent, you probably wouldn't do a ridge vent with a attic because there's so many other ways you can vent. But if you have a cathedral ceiling and you don't have any place else to vent but in the rafter bays themselves, then you have to have a ridge vent. So also, if you have an attic where the rafter, as soon as you get past the rafter tails, it's all open. So any air that goes in a vent, if it's a soffit, you don't have to have continuous. They do that continuous vent because they think it looks nice. You know, it's a linear piece. It actually does look a little nicer than them. But you could put round ones, and there's probably a certain amount of square inch size you need for the vent. But once you satisfy that, you can put them in any location you want. And they're going to just go up, and then the air is all going to mix once they get above the soffit. So you don't have to vent each rafter bay. Because you're just going in the soffit, it's just going to go everywhere, and then you got to get it out of the attic. So you got a lot of freedom when there's an attic. So, but if it's a cathedral ceiling, you have to start the vents at each rafter bay on the plate, on the wall, at the bottom. And so if you have a soffit, you can do the soffit and it will go, yeah, it would probably distribute into each bay if you have a soffit vent. But since we don't have soffits here, it's not a typical solution. So here, with an open soffit, we have to vent each bay, and there's a block in that bay. So we either put a vent for the whole opening, which would be legal because you have to have some kind of block. But what the old timer used to do is drill holes in the block, maybe 3, maybe 2 at the bottom, one like a triangular, put screen behind it, and then that vents the bay, and the block has still got the integrity of, keeping the joists and rafters from turning. I like the looks of that. I love that design. It's real. I grew up with it. And it's real simple. You know that. I think it's a Spanish or Mexican design for sure, but it's real simple. But modern homes are not that simple anymore, so they've got all kinds of things. So, but the other thing that's important, and if you take the building performance classes, green buildings, we talk about it more. The wind will blow into those soffit vents, right? And especially if you got them in the block, so the wind's just got to come under it and you can go straight through, because it's a horizontal wind. And if there's insulation coming down that rafter, or insulation of the joist, say the insulation's in the joist and not the rafters, the end of that insulation will be vulnerable to that air that's coming in the vent. And when air comes in a vent, if it's loose insulation, it'll actually move it. You'll have a pile of it in a place without insulation. So that's not good. And also, if it's fiberglass, it's not good to have it go through because it compromises the inslatability. So you need a baffle that stops that incoming before it hits the side of the insulation, and then it goes up over it. So they make those baffles that you have to put in. So this is all stuff that's happened in the last 15, 20 years because of sustainability and actually tracing the movement of air, which has become a big scientific pursuit now in building. But we figured it out. We know what does things. So you need those baffles on the side. If I find it, I don't think this book has it. Ben, did you have a question?
I will, but not just now. Yes.
So aside from that baffle, you've only got this rafter bay to get ventilation through the attic, right? And mostly the ventilation is mostly to cool the rafters because there's a lot of hot sun, and we used to have dark roofs. People actually like charcoal colored roofs. It goes in fads. The earlier roofs were lighter. If you go back in the 20s now, we had a lot of light colors. pinks and whites and stuff. And then we had this great phase where we wanted browns and dark. That absorbs the sunlight, and it's tar, composition shingles tar. And then it just bakes, and you can actually see where it is, what's the word, singed, the rafters and the plywood. Occasionally it starts fires, but it usually just gets close to a fire, so it turns it black, kind of singes it. Wow. So the ventilation is mostly for that, so it doesn't get so hot and burn up. So when you're coming through the rafter, you've got fiberglass in that rafter. If that's how you're insulating your roof, and if you don't have an attic, that is how you're insulating your roof, because there's no place else to insulate. You've only got rafter bay. You've only got the roof over your room, no ceiling. No attic. So if you've just got a rafter bay, the law requires you to do something to protect the air channel, because fiberglass will just spread out. Put it in, it'll just open up and close up the whole passage. So they make these things called soffit pins. They come in a tube pack, and they're kind of perforated where they join. So if you have a 2-foot on-center roof, you use the double, and then if you have a 16 on-center roof, you tear it in half and use just a single. And they all have kind of this thing. They have a side thing that. So what you're going to do is you're going to nail this to the plywood on each rafter bay, and it's going to keep this little inch channel here for air, and the fiberglass will be in here. The bottom of the rafter will be here. Fiberglass will be here, and it won't be able to expand and cut off that airflow on here. And every couple of years they change the design. This is more is newer than that. Back when I was your age, it was a little different. They just changed it to get bored. But this is kind of the same thing. And all you do is, it's got tabs, so you just staple them in the bay against the roof sheeting. And then you can fiberglass underneath that. And then when it comes out the bridge, you don't let the plywood, the sheeting go all the way to the bridge. You cut it back like, I think, there's a specific amount, it might be 1.5 inches to 2 inches on each side. So then you put this on it, and this comes in rolls. I think it might come in 8-foot piece, which you butt, or it comes in a roll. You can just cut it to length. And it's kind of it's kind of got wax on it. And it's just like, box material, whatever you call that. What do you call that? Cardboard.
Corrugated.
Corrugated. I think corrugated you call it. They also call that corrugated. It's not. But it's kind of a corrugated like box material, but it's coated with something so it's weatherproof. Fog gets up in there, won't deteriorate. If you had cardboard box material. And this is bends. Actually, it bends. It's got two. And so it bends for any slope, right? So whatever your slope of your roof is, this goes on top. This goes on the shingles will go all the way. The shingling, say the shingle roof, will go all the way up to where the plywood stops. So an inch from the inch or 1.5 inches from the ridge. Then this goes on top of the shingle, and it covers the end of the shingle, so you don't see the end of the shingle. Goes over the ridge. Then they make a couple of sides. And then you just nail this into the ridge. Yeah, or the plywood, next to it. And then and it's got a insect guard, so bees can't get up in there, because they will. They love these kind of things. So they can come through here, but they can't go. Yeah. And then you take a shingle and you cut it in thirds, with the tabs. And then you just put a piece, you bend the shingle over it. Sticks like a 1/2 inch out over each side. And you don't see this part. You can't hardly notice it, on the roof. So you have shingles coming up. You have shingles coming up, and then you see this, and then you have a shingle that over sticks out a little bit. So all you see is a little shadow. So this is really great. This is a great invention. In New England, I've seen pictures. I didn't remember seeing any homes. when they first figured this out, they would actually build a little box on the top of the roof. And that box would have vents on it, you know, the whole production. Good idea. And then those vents, these were the old vents. And embers and ashes could get in that, obviously. So then they discovered these kind of beehive, so they're a longer tube, and that retards embers. And they have, this is kind of the same thing. And then they actually have some that have a, you know, that's the back, but the front has to actually go down and make a turn. Anytime you make something flying, make a turn, it usually snuffs it out. So that would work. That was really a critical thing. There were a number of houses that burned down because embers got into the vent systems.
They have flood vents now.
What?
They have flood vents. Foundations, flood vents.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they have those now.
Oh, yeah.
They open up.
Yeah.
Water road rushes out and they'll close up, the water can rush in.
Oh, cool. Oh, I haven't seen those. Well, that's great. Yeah, they need that up there too, right? Because after the rain, after the fire comes the flood. Oh, great. Yeah, they, you know, it's amazing, the industry, I mean, those came out pretty soon after the fire. It was obvious that fires were here to stay. And the industry bounced back pretty fast, I have to say. So that's the venting story, and they're always, because they're fluid with insulation, they're always dealing with venting and insulation constantly. So you'll see all kinds of new schemes over the years. And with really tight houses, that's also important, the venting, and it's also becoming even bigger issue.
Sorry, Patrick, the black one that you just showed us that goes on top,
The ridge vent.
the ridge.
Yeah.
The airflow is supposed to go like from left to
The
the
airflow,
all the way out.
The airflow comes
Oh, from the sides.
from the rafter
From the
base
rafters.
to that space between the, before the ridge
Uh-huh.
comes up, and then it goes out these parts.
Oh, okay, now I get it.
And passes it down. But it looks nice. You can put a shingle cap on it, and it's pretty quick. You know, a lot of these things, I mean, you know, in expensive houses in the South County, Santa Barbara, you're gonna pretty much have tile roofs or, you know, Spanish tile roofs or maybe standing seam, even maybe some kind of good looking metal roof. But usually they won't have composition shingle roofs. You know, it's just not a upper class roofing material. And so they'll have other ways of doing that. I don't know how I think it's probably obvious the tile roofs, they'll have tile come up and they'll put a, you know, a cap across them like that. So they'll have a similar kind of ventilation. But yeah, yeah. Yeah, the metal, yeah. Well, they, you know, you can get a standing metal roof. Remember the standing roof, metal roofs on the tiny homes, Dylan and those fellows? Remember they had metal roof? Those smaller places, but you know, if you look, you know, you guys, well, you don't probably don't take the newspaper, do you? How about you should take the, does anybody read the Independent? Guys, I want to read. If you're going to read a newspaper, the least deadly is the Independent, because you can skip all the news. If you can't stand news at all, you can skip the news. Look at what's going on. Look at the new restaurants, the new bars. Look at events. You know what bands are coming to town. At least look at that. But they have the whole back half is back third is real estate, and that's great. And they're free. They usually have them here. They stopped during the pandemic, but usually up front they'll have they'll deliver a stack to Wake Center. But you know they're all over town, right? You can get them. They're free. But look at you guys should get, if you're going into construction, you should look at high-end housing, just see how people are solving things. Look at the roofs. A lot of them won't bear any resemblance to the roofs we live in and the roofs we talk about, because they're just, you know, if you have unlimited money, you can have a roof company, like a metal roof company or a metal fabricating company, make any kind of metal roof you want. You know, they'll charge you 100,000 for the roof, but you don't care. 100,000 means nothing. So you see a lot of really interesting things that are, you know, custom made, yeah. And you'll see the way they do beams on the inside. So it's good to look at, you know, they have pretty good pictures, so pick those up. They also have some really cool articles, which I always feature in my other class, my green building classes. But Dennis Allen, who's probably the longest green builder in town, he's retired now, but he's on the board of the sustainability program at UCSB, the Brent School. He's on their board. He's involved in all that thing. And he does an article in there every other week.
I work in that company. Oh, my.
Yeah, I know. And it's gotten worse over the years too. No, I mean, he left and then it's standard quite as big. But yeah, don't get me started about the Brent Center. They're allowing UCSB to be a world-class university, which is so too big for Goleta and Santa Barbara County. But anyway, the ecological footprint, absolutely. But he does a thing, and God, he did this one. I mean, it was mostly sustainable building ideas. He has a one little half-page thing. It's in the real estate thing. You go through the real estate, and toward the end of the real estate, there's a couple of things now. One is there's a contractor. I don't know him, but he'll feature some houses, and then there's people that do historical. They'll cover a historical house. Maybe they're redoing it. So really good articles. It shows a lot of the classic, various kinds of houses, bungalows that are in town, and they're redoing them. They're old and significant buildings. But his latest one was really good. It's about planting trees. Canada's doing it, and they're planting by drone because they can't get to these forests in Canada, pretty kind of area, right? There's some of the, you know, and they don't have roads in them, and there's no way you're going to chomp through the wilderness with all the mosquitoes that plant flipping trees. But they figure out a way to drop this stuff, and they've got it surrounded just like nature does with nutrients until it gets started. And they're droning them. There's this whole big push because they found out that one of the best ways to sequester carbon is just grow more trees. And so all over the world, they're planting trees in various ways. But this was a really cool way. They're doing it in Canada. They figure out a way to, you know, just take forests that are maybe damaged or something, but they're hard to get to. You know, a lot of times they don't have log roads. Places that also have a long winter, it wreaks havoc on the roads, so it's really hard to get places in Canada. But yeah, every once in a while I come up with just something that's not necessarily to do with building, but that's really interesting in terms of dealing with carbon and global warming. So if you think of it, look through that magazine. And then you'll know where the latest nice spots are, you know, where the good bars are. Well, it's so expensive. Better just to buy a pack of, you know, a case rather. Just take it home, right? Want a break?
Yeah.
Take a break. Come back and do roof trusses and sheeting. You might take a break.
Sounds good.
See if I can tell them.
These are, like oriental roots, like how they're like super long.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I was thinking of. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that wasn't one, but yeah.
They don't really flatten out like those.
There's that one house on the area.
Yeah. This is cool. I love it. You know, the Chinese painted all their Chinese love colors.
Right.
So they were all blue, green, red, and the Japanese just do that. It's so subtle. Yeah, it really looks cool. I actually like it better. But, you know, the Japanese architecture was more known here for a long time. And we kind of didn't think much of China at all. It came from China. Every design the Japanese have was written Chinese, but now we're starting to explore China more, so you get a lot more. A lot of color. There's there's some sites about how those roofs are built. There's people that go over there, make their careers out of knowing about these roofs. Professors here. Yeah. There's some really good YouTubers.
Hey, Patrick, what were we doing, the final?
It will be
Next Wednesday, right?
yeah next Wednesday. So a week from this kind of.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, so we finish up this week and then we just have that final prep Monday, final Wednesday, and final review Thursday.
There's a, I have a,
What?
okay, I won't be gone for like the whole week.
That last week?
Yeah. Only like chance, I got a vacation.
Yeah, I'll send you, can you print out a test? Yeah, the ability, if I send you a test by email,
Okay.
you can print it out, take it, and copy it back. Scan and send it back. Or are you gonna be in town or are you gonna be out of town?
Out of town.
Yeah, because I can,
Pick it up like on the weekend, like this weekend or something.
but I can, so you're coming the rest of this week and then the next week you'll be gone.
Yeah, that's it.
So I can send it to you because I'm doing it with Dylan too. He's got one too. But you've got to be able to send it back to me by email.
Just
Or-
write answers on the email.
You could return it to the Wake Center, but you're not going to be around. You probably won't be around.
Take off for a week. Take a full week. By any chance, will it be?
But you can download it though, right? You can print it.
Printers over there.
Why don't I just make a hard copy for you and give it to you Wednesday. And turn it in Thursday.
This week. Or,
You should be done by next week.
Yep.
Is that going to be? Oh, that'll be enough. I mean, can you? Yeah, because you'll have that. Are you working? I mean, do you have that next? Do you have Thursday morning off? Or do you have time during that day?
yeah, Thursday?
Yeah. Also,
Well, I work, but I get out.
well, I'll send it to you Wednesday night. I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you Wednesday. Or I'll give it to you Wednesday, and then you just bring it back Thursday. So you have Wednesday night and Thursday morning.
Probably should do like the next room. or something like that. It'll take that long, right? Or-
No, yeah, then you can do that too. I'll have it. I'll bring it. I'll try to get it by Wednesday, and then we'll just see what makes sense.
Okay, sweet, thank you.
Patrick, what are these batteries for?
We were going to do solar on the tiny home. Those were going to be to store it, but we found out that a lot of stuff on a tiny home, the students can't do much of, like the solar, because they're all learning. So then it fell on us teachers to do all of it. And we decided it was too much work for us. So we decided to streamline that.
Keep cycle batteries are not cheap.
No, and I just, I'm so busy at that for a couple of years, I don't think they can back. I don't know. It's still, I don't know, maybe. They've never been used, so maybe they're fine. I know you tried to
Well,
do one of those.
yeah, no, I believe it.
Yeah, and there's, not, I haven't seen the sign. And then we got the stuff for the, inverter,
Yeah.
About that stuff. Thing is, solar's changing so fast that I don't know how much they'll buy back, I'll see. Because they don't, people don't want the older stuff. It's like the panels.
Yeah.
God, they're changing so fast. If you buy a panel that's over 3 years old, you're not getting the same efficiency.
These batteries, I mean, Trojan's a good brand.
Well, this
Relatively
person, SunPower, what's the name of it? Solar. No, they're an old company in town, Solar. Oh, Sun Pacific Solar. They're just a SunPower distributor. They don't believe in lithium batteries. Because I bought these a couple years ago, they were still controversial about those things catching fire. And so we didn't want to sell someone a tiny home that had batteries on my house. So these are lead, but and so some people still use lead. They're heavier, but they're safer.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
But put these on that tiny home.
Yeah. No, I mean, my golf cart batteries. But they're like cars at the size of the time.
I can.
Look at the window.
Yeah. Look at them.
Was that you?
He's all like,
AC leaking?
he's on.
That's a challenge.
Freaking John,
Not bad,
you're
huh?
too easy. I didn't use it. That's
Not
what
bad.
it did.
Good work.
Oh,
What were you gonna use them for?
Solar. We put solar on the roof.
Do you have the panels right there?
Yeah, I designed it, and we bought a kit that I customized it so it could be independent. Because I saw that as the future. And, people often they put it on other people's land, their home, where they can get their waste in the water. So that's a lot of what, but some people want to be independent. So I had water tanks and waste tanks and solar and propane. I mean, it was a bitchin' design. It was just like, Rodney's RV, you can go anywhere with it.
Well, didn't you guys put a comment?
But we didn't do it because we realized that the teachers were the only ones who could do a lot of that stuff. We couldn't train students fast enough. And then we realized we didn't have the time to do all that by ourselves. So those guys basically cut out, they said, yeah, let's can all that. I spent hours and hours designing the tanks for the water system, how they would go from the sinks and the tub and, connect together and go out. Oh my God. I was disappointed, but I totally understood why we made that decision.
Hey, Patrick, I
Yeah.
texted you a picture of a spark plug. Look at it.
Is it different than the one in the book? I don't accept anything but a.
So a spark joint is for connecting two beams together. And you have two
That way.
angles,
Oh,
and then you spread them.
Now you're getting into Ut County territory here. If you're gonna do complicated scarf joints that only Chinese temple master or Rodney Ut can do.
So we used to do
Count
them
me
all-
out.
We used to do them
Rattle
all the
wire.
time.
What?
We used to do all the time for termite damage, you know, there's all those buildings in town with those,
Yeah,
with those 4x8s or even bigger sticking out. Well, you have to, they're all termite damage or rotten, you have to tell them.
yeah.
And scar bond.
Yeah, I think there are a whole bunch of scarp joints, but the fascia scarp joint is just a 45. They're-
I look at scarf truck, I got something completely fancy. And wood, you have chisels and everything.
Now even come from right, so.
Where you put a pin in and it spreads everything.
Okay, so let's go to trusses, which is back in the roofing chapter. And give me a second. Page 315, 11th edition. Page 327, 12th edition. So that's a good picture of a typical truss, pink truss. They can have small components, you know, they're usually 2x4, occasional 2x6, which is great for the trees because you don't need a big tree to get a 2x4 out of it. So it's a green way of building. And then they have struts in the middle that take that, you know, just like that purlin brace we saw, it takes the weight because those top cords are not rafter strength by themselves. So then you have a tension web, you just have a web set up that connects, and it's got a, what do they call those things? Next page, truss plate. Yeah, and I think, Dennis, did you work, was it you that worked at, no, wasn't you? You never worked up at the Hayward Truss plant, right?
No.
I had a guy in my high school spring class that worked up there, had worked up there. But Hayward has a truss plant in Santa Maria. That's where they just make custom trusses. And they also bundle wood, bundle material. And, you know, it's a real old fashioned, if you get a chance or you live in Santa Maria up there, so you get there during the day, it's kind of cool. It's an old fashioned plant because it just has roller, you know, what do you call those things? Yeah, conveyor, just, I mean, they're just loose rolls, you know, there's no electronics, they just push. Maybe they're electrified. But, you know, they have things and then they have, they put the plates on and they just have a weight that pushes them into the wood. It's pretty simple, pretty elegant. It's a great little, it's a nice plant. It's a LEED certified plant. They did a lot of green stuff. You know, landscaping and also some of the energy efficiency on the inside. It's pretty cool. But so on the next page, they show these truss connector plates. So where all these webbings and things meet, there's just a metal plate. And they've just taken a regular plate and they've got a machine that just pushes out 20 pieces of it and they just pound those right into the wood. It's a pretty, you know, conceptually it's a pretty simple form of construction, but it's pretty good.
That's just as strong as putting nails.
They're considered fairly equal in strength. People used to make trusses, especially for smaller roofs or low fan. Like I said, the place where Mike's shop is, that roof, when I took it apart, it was all homemade trusses. But it wasn't a steep roof, and it wasn't real big. But the building departments frown on it now. Because it has to, if a company does it, they know what they're doing, their engineers have designed it, and it's all passed building departments. But if you do it yourself, they don't know if you're going to do it, so everything will stay together. So I think if you went in with a homemade truss, they would make you go to a structural engineer to confirm that it's okay. And by the time you get done with that, you might as well just buy it from somewhere. But what you do is you just give the trust company, you send them your blueprints. And from the blueprints, you know, the roof plan and all those, you can see the overhangs and the elevations, all the different plans. Will outline what it is, and they just go to work and they design it for you. Now they have different kinds of truss on that page. They're all variations of that standard truss, but this king post truss might be used if you need more passageway. Anybody ever crawled through a pink truss? These ones with webbing, it's a pain in the ass, right? And especially if they don't put catwalks. Sometimes they'll put white boards between them, so at least you have. But if they don't, it's like just miserable. And so they do make them with bigger openings, you know, if that's what you want. In fact, on that king post truss, you could probably do it a small attic in that, right? Or on it, at least use half by half. Then they have a scissors truss, which mimics, instead of just a joist on the bottom cord acts as a joist in most truss, but instead of it acting as a joist, it actually acts as a rafter. And it's tilted up so it looks like a cathedral ceiling, the scissors truss. It usually isn't the same angle as the roof angle, the roof slope, because you can see where that'd be hard to do. But it does look like a, you know, a cathedral ceiling. So that's a useful kind of truss. Then they have a truss. I don't know if I'll show it here, but see where see on that king post truss, right? B on that page. Everybody see that? See where the joist is over the wall, and the rafter comes down. That's a typical. The upper one's a typical truss, but it doesn't show the wall. So I want to show you the wall. But the insulation is kind of squeezed at the end of the wall, the outside edge of the wall when you're putting it in, because the rafter cuts off the joist. So, and that's not good because you want that whole top of that wall insulated, because the hot air will just go up the inside of that wall. And if it's not insulated on top, it'll just go out that way and lost all that hot air. So what they do now is they put they build up. They put a little heel. There's got to be a picture of it somewhere. And it raises that section so that there's much more room to put it.
There's a picture of a heel trusting with a 329 truss.
329.
Single side truss.
Oh, kinda. How'd you see that? How did you see it? You were looking for it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta have a picture of it somewhere. Got to have a picture of it. I thought this, does this book, the new book, have a chapter on green building? I think it does. Let's see what it is. Green building, 741. I think the 11th edition doesn't have it, so. You're out of luck, but it may not have what we're looking for. Anybody see it? Outside wall. right? And the rafter, we know our bridge mount is right here like this. Rafter goes up like that. Right? So to squeeze more insulation in here, a lot of times they'll take this is a technique for site roof framing, but it's the same idea for truss. Put the joist in, and then they'll put a board across the top of the joist, like another plate. Then they'll put the rafters on that. Then they've got all that room in there for insulation. So that's not a site build roof, but a truss is the same way. So if this was a truss,
There's a little bit of a picture of 507 showing that the inside of reach with truss.
it's like this. It just has a heel on it. It goes down the wall. All right. Where are you looking?
You see the inside one of 507.
507? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, but that's not the truss.
Yeah. no,
Oh, yeah, no, the picture's the truss, you're right.
They use a scrap 2x8 to raise up the top board of the truss.
Oh. Well, they have just a piece of 2x8 underneath. That's A. B, an alternate truss. Oh, yeah. Here comes John. They just separate the rafter from
The top of
the joist, the rafter from the joist with a block. Right?
Yep.
Go ahead, I'll race it.
John.
So here's the rafter.
John.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
Okay, I was done a lot.
Getting him a lot more time. Yeah, John, what
He's
is
not
that?
done, he's not done yet. Okay, here we go, rafter, joist.
Oh,
Where-
no.
where's
That's
your
a
2x8?
Put a 2x8.
No, they don't always do that, they do this too. Put a block in here.
Give you a hard time.
You should label those, John.
Oh, man. Can you get up there and do that for me?
Okay. So anyway, where were we? God, who's taking all these side excursions, huh? Okay, so go to 330, just keep going, 330 in the new book, 316 in the old book. So I usually show a thing on, and I'm too tired to do it tonight. We have a film on trust, part of our series. I'll show it when we have time again. But some of the questions on the final are from that. So if we don't show it before the final, I'll just cross those questions out. Oh yeah, I can tell you what they are. So when you have a crane, it's truss safety. Okay, if you have a crane, cranes make a lot of noise, right? So the driver can't hear you if you're yelling at him. So you can't use vocal commands, you have to use sign commands. And drivers of cranes, you know, you learn that you make sure you have the same commands. There's a standard form, but people have variations. So and this is what the film will tell you. So whether we see it or not, you know the answer to that. And a tow line is a line that they're raising a truss, and they just attach the top of the truss so it can like swing, right? And that can hit someone or hit the building. So you usually have someone on the ground with a rope on one end of that thing to steady it, keep it in one direction. That's called a tow line. That was on there too. And then you need to be always in view of the crane operator. So make sure he can see you when you're around there, because he's doing this big crane. If he doesn't see you, he may drop or he may swing a joist right near you, even into you. Okay, that's another thing. So those are all safety. Yeah, I think that's it. And hopefully we get to see this thing. But see this picture, this really complicated picture of a whole roof frame with trusses. So, you know, usually when they explain this, they show you a gable roof and they're all the same size trusses. They're all triangles that you put up. But you can do a hip system. You can see on the right-hand side, and a Dutch hip, which has that little triangle, modified hip on the left side, and a gable overhang. You know, if you have trusses like this right here. So this is a site-built hip roof, and this is a truss-built gable roof. But see, if it's a truss, how are you going to have an overhang? Because it's all triangles going this way, right? But you never thought about that, huh? So, but truss people have, so they have special outrigger, like we did, things that go on the end, and they will deliver either the ladder or the whole thing together. They'll deliver as a piece, and you put it as the last truss. So same thing with the hip. They'll bring you the hip already put together, and you just, and it'll crane up as one piece. Or variations of that. It's huge, it might be variations, but they can replicate any shaped roof. This picture's living proof. Now, what do you see? What's the disadvantage? Look at that picture closely. What's being lost by doing everything for that whole complicated truss attic space? That's pretty much gone. You know, you have plenty of room to do wires and pipe and plumbing through there, obviously, but not much open space. But it's interesting what they can do. So you don't even have to think about it. You give them the plans, they look at the hip roof and the Dutch hip, whatever's on it. They figure it out, they engineer it. They send you the package, truck comes out, drops it all off. And then you've got an instruction sheet that tells you, it's got everything labeled and numbered, tells you what goes up first, the whole thing. It's pretty straightforward. And usually you'll need a crane, but smaller places can be done by people.
So instead of a ridge, what do you use to connect them?
Good point. There can't be a ridge. So that's what we're going to talk about in a second. So, but see this, see that how all those work together. So the next thing you got to do is bracing the trusses. And there's two things. They don't have a ridge, so they're all separate. So you have to brace them between each one with a block, right? So it's more cumbersome than a ridge, but you know, not really. It's different. And then you've got to brace them, and the ridge just will have them the right spacing on top, but then you've got to nail them on the bottom, but it still won't keep them from moving. So you have to put 2x4s across as you go, and that's called lateral bracing, and that's on, go a couple pages, 332, 319. 319 old book, 332 new book. See those 2x4s across? So that space them that, so that makes sure you space them all the right. Now, and of course, if you put the 2x4s on top, you have to take those off because you have to sheathe the roof at some point. So you might put those on. I don't know how they do it, how everyone does it, but you can just put temporary ones on top, not nail them through a lot, just minimally, and then go back and go through the bottom and do the bracing that's, you know, inside. You can see it's on the various diagonal cords, and then remove the top ones. but you have to use temporary bracing as you do it. And the other thing is, those can all domino down. So you've got to secure one end. And so they can't move and they'll all stay vertical. So on page 331 new book, 318 old book, it shows roof to ground bracing on one end. So you have to do something with the side of the building, and it has to actually go to the ground. And the instructions will tell you what to do there, but it's pretty obvious. And then on 333 new book, 321 old book, when you have a partition under a truss, an inside wall that's going 90 degrees to a truss, you can't connect it strongly. You can't just nail it to it. They actually have a little part, you can see it there, it's a little truss clip that allows the truss to move, because that truss, it's not a big piece of wood, and it's being held by bracing, so it moves more than a type of joist. Joist would be the thing that nails the helm.
Is that because the joist says they build camber into the joist? To the truss, is that the main reason?
What was the question?
Is the main reason of that, they build a camber into the bottom of the truss?
Yeah.
So it's too high or something?
Yeah, and for movement.
Oh.
So it would crack sheetrock if it couldn't move. So yeah, so the wall has to have that kind of clip on it. We didn't talk about. So we'll try to get that movie on the trusses, but let's go on to the hardware around roofing. So if you look on 333 new book, 320 old book, they show you a sampling of various kinds of. So walls, plates, and walls are just nailed together, and they're nailed together vertically. So earthquake forces will just tend to just push those right up. So you could stitch nail and do a little better. That's what stitch nailing is. You aim nails at each other, and then something can't pull up. It's like sewing the same way. But they don't want to take any chances, so they require various kinds of hardware for seismic areas like us, where house will shake, and hurricane places where there's a lot of updraft that's going to get under the eaves and pull your roof off. So both those require similar types of fastening with hardware, and they've got things that are actually called hurricane clips. So you're connecting the trusses or the rafters to the plate, but you also want to connect the studs to the plate, going down. So they have various hardware for that also. And then you have the hold downs, which does that, which connects the walls to the foundation instead of just to the plate that the bolts are behind. So all that. And plans, construction plans will tell you exactly what kinds of hardware you need. So if you have a lumberyard do your takeoff where you do it, you just make a list of those, or the lumberyard will do it. And they'll add up all the 20 of this kind, 30 of that kind. You get boxes full of hardware, one of them is wood. And then on 335 new book, 323 old book, you have panel clips for your plywood. So if the wind gets under a piece of plywood on an eave, you won't take out all the rest of the plywood on your roof. It's just nailed down. So you've got to connect all the plywood, every piece of plywood with every other piece of plywood. So you have, you need a clip per bay, and there's a picture, well, one of the books has a picture of it, the new book. But you've probably seen it. But as you're sheeting, when you get done with one row, you just put a clip in each bay, and then you slide the next sheathing into it. And that holds those together.
And that's only if you are building with trusses, or that's?
No, anytime, yeah, good question. Any kind of roofing. And there's a few, let's just move right into sheathing, because that's, I think we've done everything. Yeah. So sheathing, has to have the clips, and you cannot have, you know what a bay is between members, stud bay, joist bay, rafter bay. You can't have a piece of roofing plywood covering just one bay, 16 or 20 feet. It's not enough nailing. It can come off too easy. So you have to go at least 2 bays, and then you've got a middle piece that's not nailed at an edge, but actually in the middle of a piece of plywood. That's the most solid. So if your roof lays out whole sheet, whole sheet, whole sheet, and you got 1 bay left, go back and cut that piece before to enough so that last piece can be 2 bays. So depending on your layout, you'll be cutting the other piece in half or 2/3. So that's something you have to realize. And that makes counting plywood for your takeoff a little more complicated. I always, and I was never part of a big company that had hardware and software that did all the. But what I do in any project that's small or that's my own is I just draw it all out, and then I tell where I need extra sheeting. I can count it. The math, you end up taking the total area, dividing it by 32, say, and that gives you exactly what will work, but that might be including small single bay piece of plywood. That's not allowed, so you have to make sure you account for that. It wastes a little bit more, not a lot. Prices now, you're down there measuring every piece. One bay piece of plywood's now anywhere from, I don't know, 25 to 75 bucks. You don't want to waste it. And then sheathing, you saw in that Larry Hahn movie, there was a guy, like on this page 334, new book, 3210 book, they have some kind of a rig that's up high, and they put the plywood on it so it's hanging over the top edge, and either one guy can pull it from there, or a guy can hoist it up like in the Larry Hahn part away, and then the others can just pull it. So it varies, but you pretty much have to do that. I don't know if you've done it, but when it's a thick plywood and it keeps getting thicker, you used to have, I remember when they could use 1/2 inch on roofs, and then it was 5/8, not too long after that, and it was 3/4. Now it's, I don't know, anybody know the minimum? It might still be 5/8, but people use 3/4 a lot, or even thicker, right? I am. Usually they use that 1 inch on floors, 1 1/8.
1 1/8, subfloor, 5/8.
Yeah. So you don't want to be lifting that by yourself from the ground, because you've got to get it up, part way, and then you can. That's ergonomically not correct. So you want to do some kind of, do it in stages and some kind of help stands, various kinds of stands. The other safety note on that is, like we said the other day, keep a broom up there. If you're cutting up there, which, like Larry Hahn cut everything, he put it on first and then cut it in place. Some people cut it down below. Somebody will throw down a block with the dimensions and they'll cut it. That's rare. More people cut it on top. But if there's sawdust on the roof, it's very slippery, and that's a good way to fall. So you have to have a broom up there and constantly wipe it off, sweep it off. And shoes with lugs are better, even though it's hot. People tend to want to wear tennis shoes. Lug soles, you get low cut, more greasy. things, they're still harder on your feet than tennis shoes, but tennis shoes are so slippery, you know. So I would advise low cut lug soles because they grip better. And then cords is the other thing. The new cordless tools, it's great. You don't have as much problem. Sometimes there's ropes, like if you're tying people off, it's more than a story and it's dangerous. And you can trip on the ropes too, you know, these things like that. So those are safety problems. Also, carrying sheathing on a roof, if there's any kind of wind, you don't put it together, you know, when you're staying there, it's a light breeze. And when you get that piece of sheathing up in the air square to the wind, it might blow you off or over. So always got to be careful of that too. And with wind, if it's windy, it's better to have two people lift the sheet because they have more control and they can turn it into the wind and stuff. So you're really vulnerable when you're trying to do it all yourself. You know, you have bosses that want you to be very manly and save money, but lifting a sheet of plywood is hard on your body. I've done it all my life, lifted 1/2 inch to inch thick pieces, and it really is not an ergonomically way to deal with your body. It really strains your body. And sometimes carpenters, they do that a lot, it'll weaken their back and they'll have back problems over the years or hip problems. So if you can at all talk your boss in, or if it's your company, you can do what you like. Get a couple of people on a piece of plywood. It takes a little more time. You're gonna not save that time, but it's really better on you. And the size of people matters. Like, I don't worry about Dylan or John lifting a piece of plywood. I mean, Dylan's a big, strong guy, so is John. But some of us here, including myself, are not big people. And it's just that much harder for us. So you should really take care of yourself that way. And hopefully you'll get enlightened bosses, but not always. You know, they really want to save that penny and not have you do something. Those, have you ever seen those plastic plywood holders? Now, nobody uses those because it looks very sissy-ish, you know, right? But they are really bitching. They really help take the thing off. They weren't around when I was in the field, but I bought them for the classes and showed people. You've seen those? They're orange clips. They just have a handle and extend it so you're not, you know, so you have a little better grip. And they're really nice. They're nicer on your hands, and it's a little bigger stretch so you're not quite as cramped.
You know,
No, I'll find it. I might have one. Might be one over there. I'll look for some. They sell them. You ever see those dentists that borrow them?
which one?
The plastic plywood grips, you know?
Oh, yeah. I've seen them, but
Not too many people buy
yeah,
them. Yeah.
you can have like 5 sheets or 4 sheets or something like that.
Well, yeah, you can do that too, but they're just good for, if you just have one sheet, they're,
Never mind, I don't want to buy
huh?
it. Never mind, I don't want to buy it.
It's like drywall is putting up 12-foot sheets, you know, that's crazy. But
They have a
see,
machine, they have
it's-
like a mechanism thing that you put it on if you're doing like real high ceilings by
Yeah.
yourself and you just crank it up.
If you don't have one of those, you're really not very bright, if you can afford it, because that's the way to do it. But it's just so hard on your body, you know. It saves a seam or two, you know, here and there, and but at what cost, you know? They swear by it. Wonder how sheetrockers, how their bodies got pulled out. Anybody know an old sheetrocker? How's he doing? Really? And it's career.
He retired.
Yeah. That's too bad, because a lot of these are great trades, you know, like roofing's great, but you said your knees, was it you that said, sorry, your knees?
Look at his feet going left and going right.
Yeah, we gotta stop that, you know, we don't want to ruin people just to build things. And well, pretty soon it'll all be done robotics anyway, right? Robots will put the sheets up. Here, Joe, take this up, okay.
I look,
That could be good, that could be good, right?
Yeah, we were a big company, so sometimes we would have this carry what they roll, the
Yeah.
rolls,
Yeah,
you know, just up the ladder instead of
Yeah.
making a company to remove it for you.
well, you know, carrying stuff up ladders now illegal, because you need a 3-point touch on the ladder, according to OSHA.
Yeah, there's just not this.
And if you're carrying anything, there goes one of your 3, right? I mean, only leaves you 3, and you've got to take one of the 3 off to go up the ladder, right? So technically, you cannot carry something that takes that hand away. People do it all the time, of course.
OSHA's not.
And if you're really, if you're really coordinated and you know what you're doing, your balance, it's usually not a problem because you're not going to fall. But people fall. That's why they. I had a friend that fell off a ladder. I think it was the ladder was malfunctioning because he got a lot of money, but it wrecked his life. Never been the same. So you don't want to fall with that stuff. So yeah, we know everything about ergonomics and how to treat the body, but then there's the construction profession, which doesn't always know about it, doesn't care about it. So those two, you have to make those two meet the best way for you. This was a time when there were hardly any jobs, and you really don't cross the boss as much as you can because you want that job. But there's tons of jobs now, so if you get an asshole that's making you hurt your body, just hit the road. Okay, any questions about this? The nailing on the sheathings, all dictated by the plans, tell specifically what size, finish, length, diameter, spacing of nails, so that nothing's left to the imagination. And just follow that, so you don't have to think much anymore. Somebody said there's a lot, they mark OSB with lines that can help you out somewhat. So next week, we'll do roof framing, and I'll have a handout for you. I mean, not roof framing, stair framing, because I promised the guys, so that, it's useful for everybody. And we'll just devote that class to that. And then Thursday, we've got a guest lecture about alternative roofs, and that could be really interesting to help you with, because a real explosion with the green roofs, plants on the roofs, really taking off. Really a new thing. So that'll be good. Okay, you guys stay up.